Hey everyone, I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Hamilton Winters, and I'm the host of this podcast series called Inneractions. Today is episode 10 of the podcast, and we're so glad you're here. We're excited to share a discussion with you today with a good friend of mine named Abigail Griffith. Today we are talking about the topic of discipline. Hope you enjoy it. Welcome to episode 10 of Inneractions. I'm so excited. We have my good friend Abigail Griffith on the show with us to talk about discipline. Abigail, how are you?
I'm actually, we talked about this before, how I was, but I'm good.
Good.
I didn't know if I was going to say good, bad, ugly, sad, You never know until the question is posed.
Well, isn't it beautiful that all throughout the course of a day you can express all of those emotions?
Yeah. I didn't feel ugly today, though, so that's good.
That's good. I was out in the rain all day. I drove back from Oxford.
Hey, but that's good, though. The rain is good. I've had a new perspective on weather. Everybody's all run down about the rain. I was like, you need the rain, You
do need the rain. You do need the rain.
You need the rain as much as the sun.
Yeah.
It's just water.
She actually requested to stand out in the rain for the picture.
I did.
I was going to let her, stand under the overhang and stay dry. And she's like, it's just water. And I was like, who are you?
Yeah, but it is.
You're great.
either like a green halo of the overhang.
Yeah, that's true.
Or
the overhang is green out behind the airport. So it makes for kind of a weird picture. But
yeah, that was probably better that you did it in the rain, actually.
Yeah.
It'll be unique for you.
I think so too. You'll have to check it out. It'll be the cover photo of this episode. But excited to have Russell Pizzuto on as well.
The third wheel.
The third mic. The third mic. We finally added a third mic. So
great big triangle now.
Exactly. We're excited to have him on every show from here on out that we can get him on. No obligation.
Yeah, I have to be here to work it. So
yeah. He's the
I'll be here.
So
I'll be here.
Interactions produced by Russell Pizzuto.
I'll chime in with pertinent comments as we go.
Exactly. Well, we're glad you're here. Abigail, I want you to tell the listeners a little bit about how we met and then go into your story as much or as little as you want to tell, because you have an incredible story to tell that wraps right into discipline. So after you.
Yeah. We met in Israel. Probably one of the most incredible places we could have ever met. We both go to a church called Passion City Church. And they had a trip to Israel, and so we both went. And I don't remember the exact, we were on the same bus, so we probably met the first or second day we were on the bus. I don't really remember the first interaction.
Yeah.
Interaction that
I
we
like
had.
that. I didn't even pay her to say that.
But it was probably just in a group setting. It's 50 people on a bus. Half of them are old. So the only
Shout out to
young
Bus 31. You're not old.
Exactly.
You're just wise.
Yeah, no, we love all of them, but you gravitate to people who
I know what you mean.
are younger. You're like, oh, they look fun. And so after that, we probably ate dinner a lot together, and we did hung out in our group. And then, we got back, and then we started hanging out more, which I thought was great. A lot of times you go on a trip and you meet these incredible people, and then you never see them again. And so I thought it was great that we're still such a big part of each other's lives.
It has been great. And throughout those course of a couple of weeks, and Russell can attribute to this as well, that was during the time that everyone that I was meeting had something to do with production, which in my mind was God saying, hey, look, you've had this content for a while. You've had this idea. I'm putting people in your path that will help you to accomplish this if you would like to do it. And we have some more stories to go into as far as the production side of things go. But if you find a friend like Abigail, invest in friends like that. You have to, right? You do it because you want to. It's not hard.
Absolutely.
Having coffee and lunch with her is a complete joy.
Oh.
And so when I put it on my calendar at any week, I look forward to it. So thank you for even entertaining that friendship.
Oh my goodness. I love it. It's amazing. Growing our network of friends and people, like you said, who are interested in the same things or different things that you can work together with. I think that's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
Right, Russell?
Absolutely, yes. I would say absolutely.
And
as
that's
well.
what you guys do every day.
No,
right?
that you said it perfectly. Honestly,
It is.
it's like when you said networking, I think of business, but it's like then you said those other areas that we're networking in, just like we're
Yeah.
networking in the business areas as well.
Yeah, it's so important.
And when you invest in your friends, that's one of the best
That's
investments
true.
you can make.
Mhm.
Investing in yourself is great. Investing in others, you have no idea the rewards that you'll yield from those investments. So
Yeah, well, things don't grow without water. So if you don't water friendship,
shout out
it's
to the
not going
rain.
to grow. Shout out to the
Yeah.
rain. I
Shout
love
out to
it.
the
I
rain.
love the rain.
It's raining right now. Tell
Back to
the
the rain, that's
listeners what you do.
Okay.
And that was one of the questions that I just
That
put.
was.
So I created a form that I'm sending to guests now that are a couple of just thought-provoking questions to kind of set the tone, to get the guests thinking about what they can expect.
We're going to have to help you learn how to share permission with the people you send it to.
Okay. Yes.
Uh-oh.
So I sent her a
That's
link, but
my
it was from the
job.
mobile version, and it was like request access to this, and I was like, I was
didn't
just
have-
trying to share the link with you.
Maybe because you sent it on your phone
I
and I
did.
brought
That
it up
was
on
it.
my computer.
That was it.
My computer was like, oh, I don't recognize this.
Yeah.
If I would have put it up on my phone. See, it's technical.
And we just started using Google Forms. If you don't use Google
Yeah.
Forms, it's
tricky.
great.
We're still in the trial.
We're still in the
area.
trial version,
Yeah.
so we use it for business.
That's good. I always say technology is great when it works.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
So true.
So what do you
What do I do?
do?
I always tell people I do a lot of things, and then they get real curious. I kind of pause after I say I do a lot of things, and they kind of like lean in,
Mhm.
or they're just like, oh, okay, cool. And then I know that they don't really care what I do. So it's like they either lean in or they lean out,
Mhm.
and then I know what to tell them.
Are you curious?
Yeah. Are you curious or not? So my family has a co-working shared space in Kennesaw, and
What's the name of it?
it's called Desktop Co-working.
Okay.
So Desktop Co-working in Kennesaw, and inside of that as well, we have 2 real estate companies. So we have Relocal Home, which is residential estate. So I'm a licensed realtor, along with my brother, my stepmom, and my dad. And then we have a national relocation company where we send referrals all over the country as well. So that's our nationwide company, and then we have the residential. And then we also have a coffee shop. We partner with a coffee shop owner to source coffee into Desktop and supply us with the needed caffeine that we need to
Plus
do
with
what
the
we do.
life
That's
water
right.
Yes,
of the operation.
I did not drink coffee until I hated coffee
Until she was finished growing. And she was like, I'm happy with my height.
Yeah.
I don't want to grow anymore.
Doesn't matter
I heard this
anymore.
stuff stunts it. I'm going to stop it now.
Yep. That's actually not what happened. It would have been a great story, but I'm 5'2", so I would have loved to grow a little bit more.
I would like the tall,
Yeah.
not the grande, the tall,
Exactly.
right? But that's actually shorter, right?
Yeah, Starbucks is ridiculous. It's weird. I don't understand it. But our coffee shop is called Kennesaw Coffee, so if you're there, Desktop, Kennesaw Coffee, Relocal Home, it's all in the same place.
Yeah.
You'll see me.
We'll go check them out. We'll get into contact information if you care to share any of
Yeah.
that so that people
I
can
would
get
love
involved towards the end of the show. But
Mhm.
I wanted to go into your story,
Okay.
right? Because you do have an incredible story, and what you've shared with me has been extremely moving,
Mm-hmm.
has been extremely inspiring, and deserves to be shared.
Okay.
So totally up to you, as
Yeah.
much or as little, but
I would love to share my story. I grew up in Kennesaw, Georgia. So right now we're sitting in Peachtree, DeKalb,
Brookhaven.
Brookhaven.
Yeah.
So like 30 minutes north.
Northwest.
I think it's
Yeah.
north. It doesn't really matter. The listeners don't even know where we are.
Well,
So
unless they live in Atlanta.
Northwest.
Like, I know exactly where that is.
So I was born and raised, and growing up, my family, we had our house, and then my grandparents lived right across the street from us, and then through the woods in the same neighborhood were all of my cousins. So we all had this little,
Wow.
I don't like to say cult-like family, but it was. We were all in the same area, and
Mhm.
so it was like the Wellman and Griffith. My last name is Griffith because my dad married into this family. And it was actually really a big blessing to have so much family around because my mom was pretty sick my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
So she, when my parents got married, shortly after, she started to have really, really bad epilepsy. So she, it's seizures. Sometimes people don't know what epilepsy is, and it's just seizures. So she had, excuse me, what's called grand mal seizures, which is there's grand mal and then there's petit mal seizures. And grand mal seizures are like the violent ones.
Mm-hmm.
So she had a lot of those. And they thought, she went to all these doctors. She thought brain surgery would help. So they located the part of her brain that they thought the seizures were stemming from. And so when I was 5, she went in for brain surgery, and they took out her front temporal lobe. And that's the ability in your brain that helps you control your emotion and kind of tells your brain how to make you feel about things, right and wrong, what's good, what's bad. And so they took that out, and when they took it out, it didn't help the seizures, and she was just left with even more medication, and then she lost the ability to control her emotion and choose right and wrong. So she became very verbally and physically abusive, which at the time I was very confused because I was so young. But like looking back now, I knew that it was because of her illness, the fact that she didn't have her brain, that part of her brain intact. But when you're growing up, you don't know that. You just know that at one point your mom is fine and you're talking to her and it's great. And then at another point, she's freaking out and calling you just like terrible things and saying terrible things about you and then physically abusing you. And so I dealt with that for a long time. Very confusing. And I'm the type of person, and I think this was cultivated in the younger years. I wanted to fix it, to like make it better. I wanted to like make mommy better in a way. And so whenever she would have these big attacks or things like that, or she would lose control, I would go after her instead of like retreating to like a safe place, like some other people might do. Like I wouldn't run and hide. I would try to like go after her and like, and in a way I think that was like kind of antagonizing, I was just, but I didn't know. And so I was putting myself, I think, a lot in more harm's way than I should have been. It's amazing telling a story back, and like when you're living it and you're like, wow, like, I went to a lot of therapy for it. And so I kind of like learned, and I had a psychology minor. I love psychology. I think it's amazing. And I learned a lot from,
I'm sure,
what I like went through, kind of like how it stemmed from and the things that I do now. And I'm like, oh, that's probably why I have those tendencies. So anyway, going back to the story, I get off track sometimes.
It's
So
okay.
you
That's what we do here at Inneractions.
Just sitting here listening.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, just keep going.
I know. Russell's enthused.
So she lost her memory as well. So going back, not only did she have epilepsy, but probably when I was 10 or 11, she started to lose her short-term memory. So she didn't remember like basic things. She didn't forget who we were, but she forgot how old we were, where we lived, things like that. What we would tell her, she would not remember 5 seconds. So if I were to tell you, Hamilton, I like that green sweatshirt. What did you do today? What did you eat for breakfast? You would tell me what you ate for breakfast. And then she'd say, now, what did you eat for breakfast again? It's just like that. It was just quick. And so I would sit and have the
frustrating
same
stuff.
So I would just sit and we would have the same conversations for hours. And it was just a loop. And it's kind of like if you seen the movie 50 First Dates, where he eventually plays her a video, in the morning, and then she goes the whole day. But like my mom, if you were to play her the video and then she'd forget the video, you have to replay the video. So that just got progressively, it started out really, really bad, and then it got a little bit better. She never fully regained the memory. It was always a struggle. But she did end up living with my grandparents, who lived right across the street, because the home environment for us as younger, it just wasn't a conducive. So the decision was made for her to go live with my grandparents. And so she did that, and so she lived, I say, close enough to see her, but not far enough away to not have like the repercussions of her sickness. So we still experienced it. She wasn't right under our roof anymore, but she could still walk over whenever she wanted to our house and do the things she did. Until when I was in late high school, she developed multiple sclerosis, which is pretty debilitating on your body. And so she wasn't as mobile. Obviously, with the seizures, she couldn't drive or anything like that. And so she hadn't been driving for a while, which was so frustrating for her. Obviously, I mean, you're just stuck in a house and you're reliant
it's your freedom
on people, and all because you may or may not have a seizure. And so there was so much of her that I see now that was so like hard and frustrating because she was dealing with her own illness. And then whenever she would do things that weren't great, she wouldn't remember when she would lose her memory. And so not only would she, explode and do all these hurtful things, but then she wouldn't remember, so you never got an apology. So it was pretty hard to deal with growing up.
It's taxing.
Very taxing. Yeah, on your really more so, I'd tell people the emotional part of it was more than the physical part of it.
I'm sure.
So because that sticks with you,
and it's during your childhood.
When your brain's still developing.
It's when you're molding into the person that you're eventually going to become. And you're taking in all of this information as, I guess this is normal.
Yeah. And you create these habits and these things that you're stuck with. Well, not stuck with, but you're kind of growing into, or you're learning based on what is happening around you. But in it all, it was great to have my family. So I would go over to my aunt and uncle's house.
Of course.
My grandparents, till this day, they're my favorite people in the entire world. They raised me just as much as my dad did. And they're amazing. They put me through college. They've done all these things for me. And I'm just forever grateful. I hang out with them.
In the chaos.
Yeah. It was. And there was always that I knew whenever my mom would get taken away in an ambulance, or she would have an explosion, or anything like that, even before she lived with them, I would always run across the street, and I would go to their house, and they'd be waiting for me, and I would just crawl into bed with them, and then, it was kind of like a safe place. And so there's still that for me. I still go see them. They still live.
I remember you talking about them on the trip.
Yeah.
And how much they meant to you. So I know how the rest of the story goes.
Yeah.
You love horses.
I do.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was another escape for me. I used to do ballet, and that was a little bit of an outlet. I was really good at it, and I was
both of which require an extreme amount of discipline.
Yeah, and balance. I think I'm really good at balance and not much else. Not any good hand-eye coordination with.
That's been my word recently. You said discipline's your word for the year.
Yeah.
Balance
Yours is balance.
I think mine would be balance.
Yeah, that's good. Balance is a good word. Yeah.
But you said it, not me.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
But I was 7, and I was invited into the company at my dance studio, and you had to be 9, and so that was really great for me. And my mom said no. She said no. The older kids are going to influence you. And it was a Christian dance studio. I didn't know what she's thinking, so I was like, okay, well, if I can't do it at the highest level, I'm not going to do it at all. So I quit. And that's probably. Is not a good lesson. Don't quit just because you can't do it at the highest level, looking back. But it ended up being a good thing. And so I started riding horses, and that was my safe place. I was at the barn more than I was at home, honestly, if I could. At any given moment, I would go to school and then go to the barn and stay there until night. Every weekend, I was at the barn all day. And so I got my first horse when I was 11. And it's funny because I was so excited. I went to the barn right away, and little did I know this was one of the meanest horses I've ever owned. I went in the stall, and he was eating. And when he was eating, he was just like, get away from me. I hate you. Yes, hangry, exactly. And horses get hangry, too.
We know how that is.
And so I threw my arms around him, and he just reached back, and he just bit me on the back of my thigh.
Whoa.
And from that point on, I was like, oh, all right. It was just such for me, like a symbolic of how my relationship with this horse was. Anyway, we eventually sold him, got rid of that guy, and got another one who was really nice, but he was also damaged. And I had 3 horses in my life, long story short. Mm-hmm. Horses were a big part of my life. I thought I wanted to ride forever, be in the Olympics, yada, yada, yada. And I ended up graduating high school early and moving to Florida to work for a top trainer to kind of really see if this is what I wanted to do. Because I'd rode under really, really great trainers, but I hadn't done it full time. So there was a thing called you could become a working student. So you would work off your training, basically, and your board. So we would just pay for my horse to stay there, and then my training was like included in the thing, which was, I mean, it was pretty valuable because the training at the top level is really expensive. Yeah. And so I did that, but I learned that before I went, I was already getting a little bit burnt out from riding because I had done it so much and it was my escape. But then my mom, her health was still deteriorating. And so it was just taxing with school and horses and my mom. Yeah. I think I was just tired. And I was hoping that going to Florida and all I was doing was riding was just going to be the boost I needed to kind of like see maybe this is just like because I'm here, but maybe if I move to Florida, I'll gain the passion I once had back. Well, that didn't happen. So I went to Florida and it was just not a great environment for me. And the only reason it wasn't a great environment for me, looking back, I thought it was a worse environment than I think of it now. The only reason it was a great environment for me is because it was different but the same. So the training was great, but the way that they spoke to me triggered in my brain, it just was a lot like my mom. And it wasn't because of like any correlation. It was just for me, I think, just the aggressiveness of it, or one way or another. I haven't, really exactly figured it out. I think they're great, awesome people. But for me, that just triggered and it was just too much. I just couldn't handle it. And I associated that with coming into my safe space because my mom was never at the barn. Yeah. So when I was at the barn riding.
So that abuse had creeped into the only place that you could escape from it.
Exactly. And so I was like, it just tainted it even more. And so I was like, wait, this is
and now
colliding.
Where do you run?
Yeah, it's colliding and I'm in Florida. I stayed away. Where do I go? And so I was supposed to be there for a year and I left after a month.
Wow.
And so it was just, for me, that was like the end. I was like, okay, like I can't do this anymore. And so I came home and we sold my horse and I didn't look at another horse. I kid you not, did not look at another horse for a year. And just like.
Gave you that bad of a taste.
Yeah. I just like quit. And I think looking back now, I was just talking to my dad about this. I was like, I think I want to start riding again. But this time I want to start riding for me because I love horses. I think they're amazing. They teach you so much. They taught me so much. Speaking of discipline, they taught me so much discipline. Being able to care after them and ride and things like that. But before I was riding because I wanted to get away. I wanted to prove something or get away
instead of
from
running
my
towards
home life.
Something, you're running away from something.
I was like, I just have to get away, and this allows me to get away. But I was such I didn't know how to control my emotions, and I was really an angry kid because I didn't know any better. That's all I grew up in. And so that tainted my view of riding back then, and it kind of hurt it. And so I was riding more to get away than riding because I loved it, which I did love it, but it's just two different things, I think. So anyway, I stopped riding, and then I was really just at a loss. I didn't know what to do. Riding really kept me out of a lot of trouble in high school. And I graduated, so now I came back in February, and all my friends were still in school. And so I was already done, so I started nannying, and then I started, which I'd never partied before, I started partying. I started just doing things that just weren't great. Stuff that I had never done before, because I didn't have that outlet anymore for riding, but I still had the pain of being at home, and like my mom was still my mom. So without the outlet, I had to find something else. And so I turned to stuff that wasn't great. And so I did a lot of that until I went to college in August to Kennesaw State University, and I hated it. I came home at like the middle of the semester and said, I'm not going back. I was just like, college isn't for me. I just don't want to do it. I was just really running.
Out of it.
I was just out of it. And I didn't know which way was up. I was just a mess. And so my grandma, she's just amazing. She is so persistent. She's the most persistent person I've ever met in my life. And she saw this ad on the news channel. She was watching for Liberty University. And she told me about it, and I was immediately, no, I'm not going to a Christian university. Absolutely not. Like, I was running. Like, I am not going there. And so I was like, I'm not going. I'm going to go to California, and I didn't even know what I was going to do. But everybody, when they're running, they go to California. So that's what I was going to do. So I was going to go to California.
California state motto should be like, run here.
Run here.
We're waiting with open arms.
Yeah. Shout out to California. It's an amazing place. A lot of amazing people there. My aunt and uncle live there. That was my plan, to live with them, become an actress. I knew I liked theater. I didn't know what else I wanted to do now that I wasn't writing. And my grandma said, just no. She was like, you can't do that. You have to get a college degree. You're not going to do that. And so I was like, well, I'm not going to Liberty. And so she tried every other college, and she just, for months, not months, for weeks, she said, you have to just visit with me one time. Just visit one time. And this college is in Virginia. And so finally I said, fine, I'll go with you one time, just so you can stop talking about this place. And we went, and I fell in love with it immediately. It was just like immediate, just what I felt about it. I just can't even explain it. And I was like, I just knew that was where I was going to go. And I did. And immediately I went, and I think we visited in November, and I went in January, enrolled in the semester, and I got involved in sports broadcasting, which was really amazing. I always loved sports growing up, and so my brother played baseball, Division I. He pitched at Kennesaw State, so I was always at the ball field with him. My dad and I traveled all around the country. When we weren't for horses, we were at a baseball game. So I just loved sports, and I thought I wanted to be a sports reporter. And so I started working for the Liberty Flames Sports Network, which was an amazing experience. I met some of my lifelong friends and great bosses. I just can't say enough about it. It really helped me find another way to, deal with stuff that, because my mom was still alive. I wasn't in Georgia anymore, but that was still taxing, all that stuff. And so I worked there my entire career. Didn't become a sports reporter. I tried that for a little bit and realized I didn't love it. I was okay at it, but I liked producing better. And so I liked kind of coaching the reporter and coming up with the questions that, no offense to reporters, that sounded stupid. Because sometimes you're just watching and you're just like, you could have picked another question, Yeah. So I liked coming up with questions that people didn't think about, challenging the reporters to dig deeper than just, well, what are you going to do? You're losing. Well, we got to score some points, So anyway, I love that. And I did that for a while. And then, I'm trying to think of any big things that happened. When I was a sophomore or junior, in 2014, my mom passed away. In October, I was sitting in at school, and my dad called, and I thought he was laughing. He was crying hysterically, but I thought he was laughing, and so I immediately drove home, and one of my good friends from Liberty, she came with me. It was in the middle of the night that I drove, and so she came, and that was a big blessing to have her there. And so we got through that, and then I went back, and it was kind of like my mom, she was gone, but she'd really never been there. And so it was a big exhale for me. And sometimes it catches people off guard when I say that, because usually death is a really big thing, and it is. But
can either be grief or relief.
Yeah, and for us it was relief. And we always prayed that God would either take her home or he would heal her on earth, and he answered a prayer. It looking back might not have been the way we wanted, but it was an answer to prayer. And so it was a big relief to not have that. We missed her and grieve the mom she could have been for me. It was more like that, like, okay, that was the final door shut. She's not going to be healed on earth. I'm not going to have a mom. And so, that was like the closing of that chapter. And so after that, I was still, even in college, it was a little bit better, but I was still a little lost because I hadn't really dealt with everything. I think after my mom died, I really was forced to deal with everything that had happened, and how I felt and the habits I had developed and things like that. And so I started to go to counseling in Virginia. And it was a really great thing for me, just to be able to sit and talk to somebody who had no idea what I was talking about. It was because you can't talk to your family because they all have different views of what happened. Well, they know your business, but then they might not see it the same way. Yeah. So like my brother and sister were older, so they had a different experience because they could get away from it a little bit more.
True.
And my dad had a different experience. My grandparents had a different experience. That's their daughter. That's his wife. It's not their mom. So it's different talking to your family because everybody has a different opinion of what happened. And they have a different experience, and nobody experiences pain the same, even if you're living the same pain. And so being able to talk to a counselor about that was really great. And I really started to kind of break down a bunch of the walls that I had built up over my entire life, just like the walls that kept as much of the anger out, but it was building up more and more anger in me, so it was like the anger coming at me. It was like almost coming through the walls that I was building up to keep it out and like in me. And so I had to, break down the walls to kind of get it out again. And so I did that a lot in college. And obviously I'm still working on things. I think it's going to be lifelong. You're always going to be with trauma like that. It's always going to
But you took a great approach to releasing that. And I think release is the best word that I can come up with. Because you're not giving it to anybody. Right? If you release something, you just kind of let it go. Yeah. I'm not saying that you won't retain something from it, because you always will. There will always be more and more to release.
But you release a little bit more when, in my mind, I release a little bit more when I have new experiences, when I have new revelations.
Oh, absolutely.
You're allowing yourself to think, when you think about why you're doing stuff, you're like, okay, well, now I can release that. Now that I know the stem of it and the root of it, I can let that go and work on another thing. So that's why discipline is a big thing for me. We all discipline ourselves in different ways, and the good discipline, to get yourself out of the habits that you may have developed as a result of your trauma. Everybody has trauma. I don't care who you are. It doesn't matter. I don't like when people compare pain. I don't think there is any comparison, because nobody knows what's in your head except you and God. And so when people say, oh, well, I mean, your story is amazing and, you've been through so much, and I have, but that doesn't mean that, you, Hamilton, haven't been through stuff too. You might not have been through the same thing as me, but.
Well, that was the point I was going to make.
Yeah.
This whole experience, the whole Inneractions experience, if we never put out another podcast, I will have had 3 experiences by association that otherwise I wouldn't have had. And hopefully the listeners will feel that way as well. Yeah. And like you said, you can't compare pain. And I would agree with that statement. There's no reason to. But I can buy into your experience somewhat through association and watching you, right? Watching you in Israel and watching the way that you interact with people and listening to the way that you speak and talking to you right now. I feel somewhat the emotions that you've had throughout this experience. Yeah. And it's incredible to see someone like the last 2 days. I was at a speaking competition at Ole Miss that I was in 2 years ago called Speaker's Edge, Ole Miss Speaker's Edge.
By the way, did you win that?
I did win.
Hey.
I did. Yeah. 2 years ago, not this year.
That's awesome.
It was a great opportunity. So there were like 150 students. They're all grad students at Ole Miss. And so I got invited to come back as a judge, which was an incredible experience to see it from one side as a competitor and the other side as a judge. And what I was able to tell the judges, because I was one of only 2 that had ever been in the competition that were judges, I said, what you're going to see over the next 2 days is very special. You're going to see students that will blow you away with their speaking styles and their abilities. And you'll see some things that may or may not impress you. However, what you see here will be somewhat unbelievable. The more unbelievable thing that happens in this program is the 2 weeks beforehand that you never get to see, because these students forfeited their last 2 weeks of their winter vacation to show up here and to go through a speaking course, intensive, for the last 2 weeks with some world-renowned speaking coaches. And Monday, when they showed up 2 weeks ago, it's gruesome. People get up and face their biggest fear. You know, public speaking is the biggest fear over dying.
Oh, yeah.
Over dying.
Absolutely.
Right? So you have people show up. You don't think that somebody out of this 150 is terrified to get in front of people, right? And you watch people walk away in tears saying, there's no way in 2 weeks that I'm going to be able to speak in front of people. No way in a competition. And then 2 weeks later, you've empowered those same students to rise to the occasion, right? But I'm looking at these judges saying, you're seeing the polished version of these students. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at the polished version of Abigail Griffith. But through your story, I'm able to uncover and see the 2 weeks, metaphorically, before the 2-day competition. Mm-hmm. And thank you for opening up that experience to us, because it's so easy to come in front of a mic and say, hey, look, that was a chapter of my life, and I went through counseling, and I'm better now. Mm-hmm. But it's something so much more real to sit in front of a microphone and say, I don't think I'll ever fully have it together.
Yeah.
And to admit that, but to say that I'm going to make it my prerogative to use discipline as a release for that for as long as it takes. Mm-hmm. Right? And so I respect you as much, if not more, than anyone that I know. And I'll say that right now, and I'll say it forever. I'd love for Russell to hear the way that I talk about him when he's not in the room. I'd love you to hear me talk about you the way that I do when you're not in the room, but you never will. And I hope that no one ever tells you, because I respect you both tremendously. So thank you for being on the show.
Yeah.
You're mentioning a book that you're reading right now.
Yes.
And I wanted you to share that over.
Yeah. The book is called Can't Hurt Me. Master Your Mind and Defy the Odds, I'm pretty sure, by David Goggins. And I listened to him on a podcast called Entree Leadership with Ken Coleman. And it is, I think, out of the Ramsey Solution kind of umbrella.
Okay, yeah. Dave Ramsey's.
So Dave Ramsey's stuff. He has this Entree Leadership podcast with Ken Coleman, and I listened to it. It's amazing. You should check it out. Some super inspiring material. Something you can I've always walked away better than, I've never listened to one of them and was like, oh, I don't really agree. You know, that wasn't really great. So he was on there, and he was just sharing his story about the cards he was dealt in life and the importance of disciplining your mind, because your mind is your biggest tool that you have in your toolbox. You know, if you can master your mind, you can get through just about everything. And he went through Navy SEAL training. I think he said I might get this wrong, so I apologize, but one of the only people to complete SEAL training 3 times, which if you complete it once, you'd never want to do it again.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you're right.
That's huge.
And then he did some big stuff in the Air Force and the Army as well. I'm not sure the exact things that he did. He says it all in his book, but so he's been through 3 branches of the military, which is incredible. Yeah. And he's just a really disciplined individual just in life. And hearing his story a little bit in the podcast, and now I'm listening to the whole thing in his book. I just started it yesterday. It's really incredible how he turned also a abusive upbringing. I would even say, you know, not comparing, but his experiences were more so intense than even mine, into what he is now, as a result of disciplining his mind, going through, he calls it the sewer of his mind, what you tell yourself when nobody else, how you beat yourself up, or the demons that arise. He said he had to go back into the sewer and kind of dig up all that stuff to kind of, get it out. And he said something that I agreed 100% with. He was saying when he was writing this book was one of the hardest things he's ever done, writing his book, because he had to revisit every single traumatic experience he had ever encountered. And I will say the same thing. I shared my story on video at Liberty University.
It's an incredible video.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing it with me.
Yeah.
You had blonde hair, which threw me off because you
I
have like dark hair now.
Yes.
But it's nice to see the contrast.
Yeah. I had blonde hair, and I don't know how you do. We can share. You're more than welcome to share the link.
Yeah, we'll try to post it in the link below.
But when I was going through that, I had to get it to a video. So I cut out a lot of my story, but I wrote out my entire story first. So I wrote out my entire story, and
Brilliant.
so it was just hours of content. And then I had to get it down to 6 minutes, which is really hard.
Simple. Not simple. Very not simple.
And so that was pretty challenging. But the most challenging for me was again, writing the story. Going back through and thinking every single, of course not every single, but the most important things that happened over the course of my life, that was a really, really challenging thing. It was really taxing on your mind to go back and revisit the things that you thought you deal with, and sometimes you uncover that you haven't dealt with them.
And those are the ones that come up are usually the worst.
Exactly.
Too, so
exactly.
They're just waiting on you.
Yep. They're just waiting, and that was I wrote my story before I went to therapy. So that was like the start of it.
Wow.
Telling my story was the start of it, which is in my opinion the most important thing you'll ever do is share your story. Because that's one of the most courageous things you can ever do is sit and tell people you don't know, be completely vulnerable, tell them everything that, not everything, but the most important things that have happened to you in life and how you've overcome them, how, how that's changed you. That's something that, I encourage for true healing. I think that is so important.
Yeah.
If you're serious about disciplining yourself, I encourage you to go up, and this is actually something in David's book. He has 10 challenges at the end of every chapter. He challenges the readers to do something. And the first challenge was to write out your story, to go out. And I was like, yes, that's amazing. Write it out.
Yeah.
So just go through everything and kind of pick out the points. And then I haven't gotten to the other challenges yet, but,
sure they're along the same lines.
Yeah. Just like that's the first step is acknowledging what happened and writing it out. And
a lot's encompassed in that too. And you and I met multiple times before Inneractions was even a thing.
Yeah.
Trying to come up with what are we going to do, right?
Yeah.
And you were one of the unsung heroes of why this thing even became a thing. So thank you for your help.
A big champion of this. This is amazing.
But, talking in Israel and after coming back and having the meetings and saying, what do you want this to be? And both of us coming to the consensus that we want it to be a platform for people to share their stories.
Yeah.
And then the first 7 weeks, getting it off the ground, it was just me talking, but it created a foundation for us to get in here and Russell to be gracious enough to want to be a part of it, to produce it, to put a lot of work in, to meet me up here on a weekend when he doesn't have to, and to really rock it. Because this thing, it wouldn't sound half as good if he didn't do such a great job.
Hey, producing's hard. Talking's easy. You have the hard part, Russell.
I
respect you. I know. Producing is hard.
If you couldn't tell, Hamilton's a pretty good motivator.
Yeah, he is.
I just want to get, if you could see the brilliance that comes out of this man.
I see
it's
it.
easy to motivate somebody like this. But this has been such an incredible journey so far. This is part one. I don't know how many parts we're going to have of this, but this is part one. Because we have a lot more to tell. And I hope that the next time that you're sitting in this chair, that it is not a different story necessarily, but an updated version, right? Because we're always growing, we're always developing.
Always learning. I'll tell
Sorry,
you some
I got
things.
something in my throat.
No, it's fine.
Drink some water.
Tell you some things I got rid of next time, you know?
Yes, absolutely. And some other habits that you
Exactly.
may or may not have started.
Yeah.
And one of the thoughts that I added on one of the videos was, isn't the start of a good habit just the breaking of a bad one?
Mhm.
And isn't the breaking of a bad habit just the start of a good one?
I love it. You need to write that down
I
if you
think
haven't
we
already.
so
It's now been recorded several times.
Good.
so Russell and I have this thing that we do, which has been a fantastic exercise. And I'll pitch it to you. I'll pitch it to the listeners. If you can find someone that you can confide in, right? Apple does notes,
Mhm.
right? So if you're a Blue Message person, aka you have an iPhone,
Yeah.
you have the Apple Notes app. You can share a note with someone, and anytime that you add to that note, it shows up on the other person's phone with a little yellow dot, and
Yeah.
it says they edited this note. Since I don't know what date. Do you know what date we started this, Russell? Back in like November, December, something like that. We started a note section because I said, Russell, I've been writing a lot lately, and I know you have some stuff to write
Wait,
down.
no, I think it was before that because you
it
told me
might
about
happen.
this in Israel. So
Yeah.
it's probably in maybe
It probably
September
was.
or early October.
It probably was actually
Yeah.
October, mid-October. So we've been doing it since then. I don't know. It's probably 10,000 words long. It's crazy how many.
It's very long.
It's
now.
very long, and it's completely unrelated. But whatever we're thinking about, whenever we're thinking about it, we write our name. So whoever put it in
Mhm.
there, the date, and then we write, and then we put a little dash at the bottom, telling the other person that we're done.
Yeah.
And they can fill in below that. And so you can revisit what you were thinking when you were thinking it.
I
It
love
has
it.
been such a release for me. One, because I don't have to worry about those thoughts escaping me and not coming back. If
Mhm.
I commit them to paper or virtual paper,
Same thing.
same thing. And if I have someone to read it, because I don't know what he reads and what he doesn't. I think that he reads all of them. I read all of his stuff.
Mhm.
He might never mention it to me. Or the next day, we might have a 3-hour meeting about it,
Mhm.
Which often happens.
which often happens. But you see the progression of the way that you're writing.
Yeah.
You see the progression of your thoughts. And then you don't have to ruminate on the same thoughts because you've already put them out there.
Well, and then that's what our conversations end up being about. It's like, I tell you all the time, it's like, wow, your writing changed drastically in the
Mhm.
last week.
Yeah.
I love it so much more now that you're writing this way, kind of thing.
Yeah. And it can only get better from here, right? Because we know where we have been, and we might reach back to that and take some of
Mhm.
those styles, and it's just cool. So
Yeah.
talk about discipline. If there's one thing that you're going to implement and say, as an exercise, I'm going to find that one person, and I'm going to share a note with them. My sister, she shared a poem with me. I wrote a poem back. Then she wrote me 2 poems, and
my
I wrote her a
goodness.
poem back. We don't write poetry. She does. She's really good at it. And then I'll read it to Russell, and he's like, she's better than you. And I'm like, I know she
Yeah.
is. Incredible
You
stuff.
say you don't write poetry, but the poems that you write, I'm like, you're like, yeah, I couldn't go to sleep last night, so I just wrote this out. And I'm just reading it. I'm like, what the heck? This is amazing.
It's like Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, what the heck? Your family's so talented.
I have some very talented friends that I try to emulate, right?
Yeah, but it's still, even if you're emulating someone, you're still putting your own spin on it. So it's still you.
That's true.
So don't cut yourself short. I'm giving you a compliment.
Thank
Accept
you.
it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well,
true.
imitation's the best compliment,
Yeah.
right?
The best form of flattery. Not everybody agrees on that. So
That's true.
It's a
That's
widely
true.
debated topic. Some people get real
Highly
offended.
controversial. Thank you for the compliment. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
In conclusion, 1, thank you 1,000 times. 2, because this has been such a thought-provoking topic and discussion, which is one of my 3 things, right?
Yeah.
Provide, promote, and provoke. How can people get in touch with you if they want to continue the conversation, if they have any questions, if they were like, man, I want to follow what she's doing. You get to travel a lot, which is cool. You
Mhm.
post some really cool pictures.
Thank you.
And anything that we do together from here on out. How do they get in touch with Abigail Griffith?
Okay, so you can get in touch with me. I'm not going to give you my home address, but I will give you my cell phone number and my email.
You don't have to give cell phone either. We usually do email and like Instagram handle.
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's fine. Yeah, I don't know you yet. I don't want anybody.
We'll just
like-
censor
No,
that.
no stalkers here.
Yeah.
But although my cell phone number is on my email response, so I'll just give you my email, and then if you email me, you'll have all of it. My email is abigailgriffith95@gmail.com. So ABIGAIL griffith95@gmail.com.
Cool.
And then my Instagram handle is Abigail_Griffith_. Simple.
Simple enough.
Yeah.
I like that. You can reach us as always. I'm at Hamilton Winters, and email is hamilton@inspireaviation, NSPIRE aviation.com. And Mr. Russell Pizzuto, I'll go ahead. If they want to get in touch with you, how do they find you?
Of course, Russell at inspireaviation.com.
As always.
Is of course part of it, or is of
No,
course
sorry.
just
That's a good question.
That's just one.
We don't want to confuse people here.
Yeah. We'll take the of
This
course.
is meant
out.
to be as clear as possible. And then,
Jury, please strike of course from the record.
my illustrious Instagram handle, which you should all check out, is Aviator Russ.
Aviator Russ. To all the listeners, if you like hearing the voice of Russell Pizzuto and Hamilton Winters on the podcast, be on the lookout. We're coming out with an aviation podcast together, which will be called Airwaves. You can find it on Spotify and the iTunes store. We're really looking forward to that. It's going to be a completely different vibe, but hopefully we can get people that are already interested in aviation an opportunity to really dive in and hear some stories, and then hopefully attract some people that really aren't interested yet.
Hey, you might
So-
track me. I might
I
be a
know.
pilot this
Come
time
on.
next year.
Well,
You never know.
you're already sitting in our office, so we at least got you through the front door.
Everybody
So-
wants to be a pilot. They just may not know it yet.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
true. Everybody loves planes.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
Again,
I loved it.
To all the listeners out there, as always, thank you for checking in. We have so much fun throughout this experience, and it wouldn't be possible without you listening along. We can talk all day long, but if nobody's there to listen, if a tree falls in the woods, nobody's there to hear it. Does it make any noise?
Yeah.
We're trying to make some noise, but for the right things, to talk about meaningful topics, and today was definitely a meaningful topic. So your interaction today is go out there and find a way to make discipline your release. Thank you so much for listening to the show. We'll catch you next time for episode 11. I'm Hamilton Winters. Go love on somebody today. Thanks, guys.